It's episode 2 officially of the Polarizer podcast. Benny Bish with you, your host. This is powered by Speed Cafe, and we have the great Paul Morris in the studio with us, which is not really a studio. We've already established that you don't feel scared to be in Tony Longhurst's garage.
Same place, same clothes. I'm not scared.
You're not scared. And at this stage, you haven't been to Thailand yet, have you, Roland and Dude? Because we can tell, because your eyes, you weren't going to get any work done while you're over there.
Well, what sort of work are you talking about?
Well, we did talk about dental work, but we thought there might have been some other...
I think you're getting a bit racist there. I'm not going to go there.
Well, we're not going to be polarising in that direction, but we are potentially going to be pretty polarising today because we will get the chance to do a little bit of a preview of what's coming up with the Bosch Power Tools Super Sprint in Perth. But let's cover a couple of other topics, and we'd also like to put the invitation out there, if you're listening, watching, that if there's some things that you'd like to hear the opinions of RD and the Dude, then please put it in the comments. Let us know what you'd like to hear them prattle on about and their thoughts. And really, we're drawing on some really, really very different journeys in your motorsport careers, yet it covers so much stuff. And so there's a couple of things that I'm going to be self-indulgent and ask the question on. But I'm going to start by, let's open up this whole thing of what grinds your gears and things that really, really annoy you about our industry and what you do to change them. And now, I don't even have to word you up for this, Dude. I know you'll have something. What grinds your gears?
Oh, for me, it's the spool.
Okay, so we're going straight to Supercars?
Straight to Supercars.
Right.
So, Gen 3's here. It's been done. What can be better about it? And I think we can learn from what NASCAR have done and get the spool out of the driveline and put a diff in the car. So, effectively, at the moment, you've got the Australian Group Limiting Championship. So, to make speed in the car now, you have to limit the droop so you can pick up the inside wheel and make the cars rotate. Everyone's fixated about that. It creates a bit of one-line racing when you haven't got other variables like different track surfaces and the wet, like we spoke about in the last episode. So we've got the same transmission basically as what the NASCAR have got, and they looked at what we did, and they actually thought about putting a spool, a locked rear end in the car. Then they decided to go to a differential that would mimic the way a Detroit locker would work. But I think that's what we need to do is get that in the car as quickly as we can.
Yeah, we're in horrendous agreement. I mean, unfortunately, we're in a massive agreement over this. I mean, I've been pushing for a diff for years, and then running in GTs the last 6-7 years has made me even more an advocate of having a limited slip diff in a supercar. And for exactly the reasons Paul says, but it creates the potential for more lines. And the worst example I saw last year was the Bend, which is a nice wide track and everything, but just one-line racing at the Bend. And that came straight after we'd seen, for instance, Shane at Chicago. In the Cup car with a differential in basically what's a 5-speed version of our 6-speed transmission. You don't have to make it wide open, the rules. You can keep it limited in terms of the ramp angle, but you can, and the plates that are used, because that can become very technical and create...
well, NASCAR have done that. They use pneumatic piston for the preload, and
but it's I would actually make it so that you could adjust the preload. Mm-hmm. So for drivers to have a tool that's it costs nothing, but creates a variable, right? So and you could adjust it without there are no flaws on a supercar like there are on a GT car. You could adjust
flaws or flaws.
Sorry, were there L's in that? So there were no aerodynamic flaws on the cars.
Oh, not flaws.
What's the spelling? The spelling of flaws is
double O.
Double O's. Yeah. Yeah. So and that means that you could adjust the preload, for instance, on a diff in seconds.
Right.
And so drivers could then dial it into their own preference of, how stable or unstable they can take the car on the entry to a corner.
Yep.
And create a point of difference and the potential for people to tread on the dicks as well as make the car better. And so, whereas if you're not careful, you end up with the cars the same all the time, then at some tracks you'll just get follow my leader racing. So I'm absolutely on side with Paul's opinion over that, that it should happen sooner rather than later.
Apologies to anybody who got lost in the tech talk, but I guess the best thing to talk about now, to the average person who doesn't really understand the stuff that you guys have talked about, what does that mean for the fan on the hill? What are they going to see if you got your way?
You'll see drivers being to use different lines through the corner.
Right.
So to put it basically, both rear wheels turn at the same time at the moment. So to make the car turn and exploit its ability to turn, you pick up the inside wheel off the ground and the car will turn, basically. Right. And over the years going back to 1994, you used to have a cable or a chain to hold the diff up to do it. Then we developed twin spring to do it. Then they took that away, and then when they took the twin spring away, teams exploit other ways to do it. Triple Eight are really good at it. They designed the new car, so it was probably designed around how they tune their car. So the teams are catching up to them, but the best thing to do is just get rid of it. And then the other thing too, it allows drivers to come from overseas and opens up your driver use of different drivers, because to exploit the way you drive the car with the spool is a different driving technique.
What does SVG talk about behind the scenes when he talks about the difference between driving a supercar and driving a NASCAR now?
Well, first thing to remember is that the Xfinity car and the Cup car are completely different from one another. So the Cup car is much closer to a supercar, right. And it's got a very similar back end to it. But as he said when he went to Chicago, this car turns,
right?
Because it's got a diff in it, right? So you lift off, turn in, etc. And because the rear wheels, as Paul said, the inside one can then rotate at a lesser rate than the outside one as you're turning through the corner. And then as you get back on the power, then they lock and you go. Mm-hmm. And now that having the wheels rotating at the same rate with a spool diff does have a sort of ABS effect on the rear axle. So some drivers won't be able to put up with it being as loose on corner entry as you might like to optimize the turn-in. Maybe they don't like it. Well, that sorts the men out from the boys. And
that's tunable too.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you had that preload, just adjustable on the bottom of the diff, not from in the car, but from in the pits, in the pit box. But Shane saw it as something that made the NASCAR better and more fun to operate at when he raced in Chicago last year.
Yeah,
with all those 90-degree turns there.
Yeah. So the reality is, you guys are connected. You've played a massive role in not just Gen 3, but the philosophy behind Gen 3. How do you get it changed?
Just do it.
People are scared of what they don't know.
Right.
And there's a whole group of people in the car and out of the car in Australia who have only grown up with one thing. They've only known one thing. They haven't raced other sorts of cars.
If you let the drivers test it, they won't like it.
Oh.
Some of them won't. No, I think the ones with broader experience maybe will.
True. But what the spool allows you to do is exploit the braking, and if you do lock the rears, you still got control of the car.
Right.
So they come out of go-kart racing, it's the exact same thing, right? Supercars is just a big go-kart.
And Jamie was the king of trail braking.
Yeah.
In his day, wasn't he? For years.
Yeah.
He mastered the art of turning the car in.
Yeah. Getting some rotation off the rear axle.
Yeah. But I also think it would introduce a little bit more unpredictability, a little bit more jeopardy. And jeopardy is is what we need, whether it's from a technical point of view or a sporting point of view.
And a lot of OEM relevance, so everyone can go out and buy Camaros.
There it is, bang. So, okay, with that established then, let's just switch over but stay in that same lane of the overall philosophy behind Gen 3, because you played a big role in that. Do you feel like that may be an example of where we lost the way on the philosophy, or do you think that we've stayed pretty true to it?
No, that's a sort of side subject, if you like. That, but one of the philosophies of Gen 3, when I roll right back to when we discussed it, the management of Supercars at the time, the likes of Sean Seamer and the marketing director at the time, John Casey, was to try and have a car which could be raced more often for less money.
Right.
And now that doesn't mean starting off with a cheaper platform. It means starting off with a better platform. But you want you want components that can run without having to be taken apart all the time. Mm-hmm. So you put a cheap front wheel bearing on the car and you take it out in the wet, you've got to strip it all down and rebuild it. So that's, to me, that's just dumb.
Right.
Having cheap shock absorbers on the car is just dumb. But so if you get the mix of the car right in terms of how it's built, you then should be able to do what happens in GT racing around the world, which is effectively container racing, where now you don't have to do it in a container, but what it means is you can go from race meeting to race meeting without coming home and rebuilding the car each time.
Right.
So for me, for instance, if the cars are bulletproof enough mechanically, you're always going to have bodywork. When you have the sort of racing we've got, you're going to have bodywork damage to some extent. But that's relatively easy to deal with if it's superficial bodywork damage. Then you go from the Grand Prix, for instance. You go out of the Grand Prix and you containerize the cars and go straight to New Zealand. So you cut out the air freight, make the event more sustainable, less reliant on government money. You come out of New Zealand, you come back to Australia, you go straight to Perth. You go Perth, Darwin, Townsville, QR, etc. And that was the philosophy, if you like, or part of the philosophy in the first place, to make a really good car. And I mean, that was one of the reasons the car originally had a flappy paddle gearbox, whether people like it or not, so that you could just leave it in there for 5,000-6,000 kilometers and not touch it. It wasn't for any other reason. It was for the longevity of it from a service point of view. Now, people wanted the drama or whatever of changing gear with manually, etc. We can't see it because of the net. But that was the reasoning, to make it so you could just go race. And I think that's been lost in the wash along the way.
Do you see that, Paul, as something that's feasible? Or is that like, no, man, we've got to turn up to all these, you've got to service the car straight after the event? Or how does it all work logistically?
I think it could. You probably need more cars too. So I don't quite agree with Roland because on the base cost, but if the car was a bit cheaper, you could have more of them.
Okay. You have multiple cars that you could run depending, and then you sort of like leapfrog?
Yeah, just have a fleet, a rotational fleet if you're racing that much. So
you don't need to do that in GT.
Right.
The only reason you need another car is if you have a big accident.
There you go.
That's why. And for sure there's if you've got a few spare cars around, then it makes it, then not everyone has to have them. If you've got spare cars, you can say, for instance, if Triple H's got one, well, they should be able to lease it to somebody else. Or if Walkinshaw's got one, he should be able to lease it to somebody else if they need it. Yeah, because of it.
Championship spares.
Yeah, if you like. Yeah. They're there so that if you've got a return to base type accident that needs the front rail straightening or whatever, you can do it. So that's the philosophy, to try and have more races for less money.
I remember back in the mid-2000s, like 2005, 2006, and I was just a fan. And I went to the Motorplex, and the drag racing was on, like a top door slammer. And they had all these massive transporters, and then there's this container sitting there. And of course, it was Gary Phillips, who at that time had probably won 15 national championships. I'm like, what's the go? And started chatting to them. So, well, logistically, this is the most efficient way for us to get around the country for the Pro Series at the time, which had massive amount of rounds. And they just went out of it. They would service on the Sunday, put the car in the container, and then send it. Sometimes it would go home, but sometimes it would go to the next racetrack. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
Yeah, but I mean, broadly, yeah. And it doesn't mean you never go back there, but it's back to base. But you've got the potential to keep on racing. And that's the way much of the GT world operates around the world. At Sepang at the weekend, last weekend, a few weeks ago, we were at in Malaysia, 2 days before the race meeting, service the cars, etc. Go through the race meeting. On Sunday night, you do set down. You make a note of everything you need for the next one, if you need new parts or whatever, and then you're ready. By the time you go to the next event, you've got the parts ready, and you're there a day early to do the servicing on the car, and you go from there.
So does that mean, part of the attraction of going to a Supercars round is that all the fanfare and the beautiful transporters and that? Are you suggesting that we don't even need transporters?
No, what I'm saying is that you can put them in the transporter, you can go home, and the transporter can drive from Perth to Darwin.
Yeah.
Right? Or Darwin to Townsville.
Right.
Without the need for everyone to feel that they've got to driver up to go home and et cetera, et cetera. They can give everyone the time off, so they're not accruing days in lieu, which are hugely expensive for the industry, and not just for the teams. Yeah, for all the peripheral businesses as well. Everyone's got to give days in lieu, so you can get all of that out of the way. It doesn't mean you have to use containers, but it means to have the ability to be able to put the cars in the trucks or whatever and take them to the next race meeting and have them closer together without having to go back to base. And that was impossible really with the old car. With the new car, that was always part of the intention.
Dude, possible?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Anything's possible if you've got enough money.
But that's the point. We're trying to save it. So what have you got to do to set that up? Is that spend a lot of money now so that you can establish that sort of culture?
I think part of it was more of teams could use central parts or like Porsche would do, or if you look at GT, 888 have the Mercedes parts supply. So the idea of having, the teams or have a GM or a Ford parts supply, but the teams are that used to just doing it themselves and being independent and being geared that way. They haven't thought that way. They just still go racing the way they used to.
They don't want to be last in the queue.
Probably.
If three people have a shunt, they want to know the third person's still got the spares that they need.
But if you said we're going racing 3 weeks on the trot with containers and we're going here, and you're all going to get a quid out of it, they'd adapt pretty bloody quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which we've done before.
Yes.
Yeah.
So from the point of view of NASCAR, NASCAR's going back to home base, aren't they? But they've got multiple cars. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they went to having 24 cars per entry to a maximum of 4 now, I think, within the regulations.
24?
And then they would have a primary and a secondary car come to each event. Now they can only have a spare car between 2 entries, and it can't be sign written, and it can't have the driver's seat in it. So they've regulated the team spending money on being prepared for a disaster. So
yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So we started this whole session off by talking about what grinds your gears.
Oh yeah.
Is this at the level of that it grinds your gears that we're not at that point, Roland?
Yeah, I think because I want to see the calendar expand and the teams to be able to benefit from that, and for it's incumbent upon Supercars to lay on good events where they can afford to pay the teams properly for turning up. They're the performers, but also make sure that the teams' costs are not getting out of control along the way.
Yeah. Well, whatever you think about that, we'd love to hear from you in the comments section. What do you think? Is that where we need to be heading to make it easier? And I guess that leads me to the next thing. I'm taking out of this last episode something I heard you say to Tony Quinn about you're pushing this barrow, both of you, if we need to go back to QR. Is that another what grinds your gears subject?
For me, it is, because every time you drive in there, Quinny's done something.
Improved it.
Yeah, and that's on a weekly basis. And he's put another tree there, he's concreted that, and he's continually investing in that place to make it better for people to use. And the natural amphitheatre of that place, like, it used to be all dirt on the hill, it's now all grass, and there's seating and shade, and there's proper food, good toilets. It's just such a good venue, and he's done such a lot with it. To not have a showcase event there, like our premier motorsport in Australia should be racing there. So it's got to be a priority.
Especially given the number of people who live around there who are dead set cast iron fans.
Yeah, well, the place is packed out every weekend with just people anyway.
Yeah.
So
obviously begs the question, why aren't we there now?
I mean, I think Supercars...
drunk on government funding.
Yeah. Well, that's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, it is. Absolutely. Yeah.
So there is no government funding to go to QR. That's what you're saying?
If there was, they'd be there.
Is it maybe they want too much? I don't know, but I don't know enough about the dynamics of it anymore. But I think that they've got caught up in this 12 events thing, which the teams get paid to do 12 events, and then any more they get more money. But the agreement between the teams and the and Supercars is a starting point. That's where he should be negotiating from, depending on the event. It's the deciding how much money an event is worth to everyone from that, and some will be more than others. Yeah, if they end up going on some crazy adventure to Qatar, you want to make sure that the teams are getting the most money they can out of it. On the other hand, if they're going to Winton or QR, then the teams have probably got to be more sensible.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's to me, nobody's got the thinking hat on about what works best for everyone.
Interesting. Should we be going back to QR? That's a good question. Put your thoughts in the comments. I know I'd love it because it's obviously my backyard. I've got to say, though, I'd love to see some more character in that racetrack. I don't know. Do you guys think that from a racing point of view? Part of me wants to see a hill or a bridge or something, just from an entertainment point of view. Is that wishful thinking?
Yeah, I actually like the circuit. I think it's two big fast corners, and you've got 3 good braking zones. So from a driver's point of view, it's a cool track to drive. And if it creates good racing and the crowd can see the whole circuit, that's good enough for me.
That's a good start. I mean, you guys, Triple Eight, have done a ton of laps out there over the years with ride days and everything like that.
Yeah, I mean, the circuit, its advantage is that people can see everything.
Yeah.
Right? From a spectator point of view. They can see the whole track. And so you need to exploit that. I mean, I don't know whether there's the potential for making turn 3 also turn into turn 6 to have a different layout, like an oval.
Yeah.
For because it wouldn't cost that much to do. You'd have to be a bit careful about the speed that they arrive at turn 1, maybe, etc. And assess that properly. But maybe there's a scope to do something different there as well. So you could have 2 different layouts, maybe on the same weekend or whatever. But it's a fabulous place in so much as you can see the whole thing, take advantage of it. I think it'd be a relatively straightforward place to light. Peter Zibras probably have to put the lights up or whatever for it with Premiere. But whatever it was, I don't think it'd be that hard to do. And in the summer, it'd be a great place to be there in the evening, wouldn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Because you did talk about that in the last episode. You mentioned wrong time of year and all those sorts of things. Interesting. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Should we be going back to QR? A couple of things that grind these guys' gears. We've got a couple more. We'll take a short break. That 2025 Supercars calendar would be surely somewhere in the back blocks, would be getting written up at the moment. What's these guys' thoughts on where we should be going and when? We'll find out after this.
At Truck Assist, we only cover one thing. Specifically, trucks for landscaping, trucks for cabinet making, bed trucks. Smell that bread truck. Trucks for chippies, ones for brickies. Oh, and really big vans. We get your business sorted. With roadside assist if your battery says nope. Downtime cover if this is your only hope. and motor cover if things don't go to plan.
G'day, mate.
That's insurance from the specialists. Truck Assist, it's what we do.
Welcome back to the Polarizer podcast with Paul Morris and Roland Dane. Benny Bish, your host, and we're in this fantastic personal collection of Tony Longhurst's here at Garage 25, a number that you saw pretty close a few times, dude.
Why don't we do the next one from Roland's garage?
That's a good idea, actually.
Yeah.
And then your garage next time, that's got a few, relics in it.
Yeah.
And then you could do it mine
Including
with
us.
and then you could do it from my small little garage with a 79 Camaro, and I don't think that'd be that
We'll go to your
expensive.
joint, then you can do the theme tune.
This keeps coming up about the theme tune. All right, we talked about some of the things that grind your gears. Some great concepts there, and I'm sure that there's people who'll be divided on some of your opinions on those things. Let's look at this 2025 calendar because, like we said, it's probably being drawn up somewhere. There must be a skeleton of that somewhere. If Supercars came and walked in right now with a piece of paper and said, guys, what do you think we should do? What would you do first, Paul? Would you keep it pretty much the skeleton of what we've got now? Would there be many changes?
First of all, you need to work out where the money was coming from, but it's easy to say, but I think we've lost the ability to make a race meeting wash its face with people coming through the gate.
Right, okay.
So just to go, that's what I'd like to do. You need to understand where their funding's coming from. So, and again, that's why I think we should be going to a place like QR because I think it could stand on its own 2 feet.
Right, without any funding.
If I was them right now and they had the balls, I'd just do a JV with Quinny and go, let's make it happen and back myself.
Would you know, RD, what percentage of the events have got significant government funding and which ones haven't?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, pretty much all of them. So all of them have at the moment. And it's, I agree with Paul, but I think it's wider than just motorsport. I think the whole of sport in Australia has got hooked on government money.
Right.
I don't think it's a good thing long term. In the short term, you'll look at it and say, "Oh, let's grab those dollars while it's there."
New stadiums and
Look at what's going on in Tasmania at the moment with the new stadium in Hobart. I mean, half the population doesn't want it, half does, or whatever. It's certainly a divisive topic on the island. So I think everyone's got hooked on this money, and in the long term, we need to understand that it probably won't be there forever.
Right.
There are so many other pressures, plus the fact that we want to maintain those 2 or 3 really special street events, etc. We want to maintain those. Those do rely on government funding to some or an extent, to a greater or lesser extent. So the permanent tracks would be nice if you weren't as reliant on them. A bit of subsidy for going across the Nullarbor to Perth or up to Darwin, etc. But it shouldn't be make the category vulnerable if suddenly it's taken away. So we need a better base. And I agree with Paul about QR is a great example of somewhere where it should be able to work and wipe its face as it used to. It wasn't that many years ago that it did, and it had no government funding. So the calendar needs probably to begin with 2 more events in Australia is the first thing. So you could add QR and Winton, I believe, straight away, and then you may or may not add another, but you need to if you've clearly lost Newcastle. So you need to also look at the timing of events in there, and to make up for the loss of Newcastle, do you go back to Phillip Island, for instance? So there's the venues are available, but I think also you've got to look at what fits where, and Tasmania does not fit in August. To me that was just the dumbest decision the Supercars made. In the last year. The second dumbest was trying to have Christmas twice a year with Bathurst. So get away from that, probably look at starting the event under lights, either at QR or at Sydney Motorsport Park, and then having whichever one isn't under lights, then you run in July, August time. Of those two, you've got two venues. You got to remember that you got to stay north of Sydney or north for a few months of the year when the weather is at its worst. Although it hasn't stopped them going to Tassie this year, as we've said, and then place the calendar, which is quite hard. It's difficult to you got to take into account Easter, the Grand Prix, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Uncle's Day, Aunt's Day, whatever it is through the year. Know that Bathurst is going to be on the second Sunday of October, and then you're going to finish up in Adelaide towards the end of November. So you got to work back from that, and it isn't done in 10 minutes. I mean, Paul will remember when Tony Cochrane was chairman, that we'd normally have a draft in June, the first draft, June board meeting, and then it would evolve towards being launched publicly in September, right. Before Sandown. Unfortunately, that's got lost in time now, and it keeps going out to October, November, etc., which is bad for everyone, bad for business.
Hard to plan. It's hard to plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't forget the marshals and all the volunteers who are going on holiday to some of these events.
Mm.
Yeah, they need to know when they want to book time off, etc., as well as everything else. Booking hotels, flights, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, any thoughts on it?
Oh, he's right.
Yeah,
as he mostly always is.
Wow.
Sometimes you don't know he's right at the time, but you just got to wait 3 months. And he normally is.
That's my job, is to try and find something where you guys do disagree. So you mentioned a couple of venues there. It's not like we're short on venues at all. So that's sorted. We could slot them in there. But can I ask the question from let's go back to the 888 accounts and paying bills. Is that same budget for your calendar year based on what you're bringing in from a sponsor, no matter how many events? Or is it, okay, we've got 3 more events this year, so this means your sponsorship dollar has to be this much more? Like, how does it work? Is it work both ways? Because at the end of the day, you've got to be able to pay to, costs money to go to these events and run at them.
It's a tricky one. It's a very tricky one because, and different contracts vary, from team to team and different sponsors. Right. Most people would have probably a minimum that they've got to do 12 events or thereabouts a year with a sponsor, whether it's Supercars or a team, and they've got to have a Bathurst 1000 in there. Right? That's the sort of base of a lot of contracts. But actually the sponsors expect a bit more than that. Right. So now they know, but you've got to have these safeguards, as we saw during the pandemic. When the pandemic, we could only do 10 in 2020. Mm-hmm. And the sponsors, most of the sponsors wanted a couple of quid back. Yeah. Because we were only doing 20. So you've got to have minimums in your contracts, but there's also an expectation of of getting more, because you disappear from the public psyche too much if you're not. So I believe there's it's a very sort of rule of thumb approach, but there's an expectation really of about 14 events as being really the realistic
sweet spot,
if you like. 15 would be nice, but around that level. But so you've got to try and do it in a way that doesn't cost the teams too much more. Now, they've got certain fixed costs.
Sure.
It doesn't matter how many events you do, for the most part, right? So then you've got to look at the variable costs and see how best to use them. And one of the things that I think, and Paul would know more about this than me, but the approach of NASCAR, which is that they've from as a carryover from COVID, there's far less practice, etc., and more emphasis on the actual racing. So the mileages have transferred from one to the other. Now, that could be an approach that would be used by Supercars, in my view, at some of the events to keep costs under control. So your mileage that the cars covers doesn't go up exponentially, you could just say, for instance, at circuits which Super 2 has visited before, so the rookies actually know the circuit. Now, they might not know the car that well at the circuit, but at least they know which way the corners go. Then you take an approach, well, let's have 15 minutes practice, qualifying, and go racing. To have that type of approach. To me, that's worth considering. Sorry?
It's worth having a crack at.
Well, to try and get more events without breaking the bank.
Yeah.
Yeah?
See, this is, even though this is episode 2, it's the 3rd time we've had chats. And one of the things I've picked up on listening to you guys is there's this thread of whatever we do, we want more variables. And that's another one. That's a cracking one. Less practice means, I mean, we're doing so much practice now. It's like your car is absolutely at its best when it comes time for qualifying. Surely one less practice means there's just a little bit of room that we haven't nailed something. What do you think?
Oh, I like it. Look, you do it every Saturday night. You go to the sprint cars, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
You unload it, warm the engine up, and let it rip.
Yeah, literally drive out onto the racetrack.
And
you go and do 3 hot laps, and then you go out for qualifying. You literally floor it, and you're on at the highest level for 2 laps, and that's your qualifying.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. And our guys are good enough to do that. And where it would work too in Australia, probably better than NASCAR, is we have a really good support act.
Yeah, right.
So the fans aren't going to be starved of something to look at. So definitely worth doing. Just unload them and let them rip.
Yeah, I mean, something like QR, for instance, there's absolutely no reason why, especially if you're racing under lights, that you couldn't have a 2-day race meeting. You roll up on Friday, you've got your support categories, you've got minimal practice for supercars, a short quali, and then you're into the race, and you do the same on Saturday. So you start at, 11 o'clock in the morning on Friday and Saturday, and you roll through till 9 at night or whatever it is. So isn't that a template that's worth looking at?
It's worth looking at, but the reason they want to have Friday is they've taken the government money and they want to tell them how many people they got through the gate.
Yeah, but you mean
that's why they invite all the schools.
The third day, yeah. But and at some events you'd still do that.
Yeah,
right.
But you're going to get all that at Bathurst and
and at the Gold Coast and Adelaide and Townsville.
Yeah, definitely worth doing. Keeping some miles off the car, but then the teams will go to a ride day on the Monday afterwards anyway and wear them out.
Yeah, but it's for a good cause.
Yeah,
and it's all part of the package.
Dollars.
Yeah,
and traditionally you'd put some components in the cars that were
high on miles.
Yeah, you swap a bit of stuff out. So
yeah.
So it's probably
not
too right. But you own a race team to go racing. That's why you do it. Okay. The drivers drive the cars to go racing. It's not called a practice team or a qualifying team. It's called a race team.
Yeah.
And most of the teams now are owned by high net worth people that if you said this is what we're going to do and you can go racing 3 more times a year, they're going to go racing. That's why they do it.
Because that's what they want.
That's what they do.
It's on a rare occasion that you find these guys that seem to be finding every excuse to not go racing. But the vast majority, we just want to race more. So, okay, so we've got this... So far, when it comes to the 2025 calendar, you're saying we need probably 3 more events, is what I'm hearing you guys say?
Well, maybe net 2 more. You've got to replace Newcastle.
Yes. Okay. Right, so net 2 more, less practice, so you've got less miles on everything to be able to make up for those extra 2 events. That's where we start. What else would you change? What's something that about, this calendar this year that you go, we've obviously made the point about Tasmania.
Tassie.
Yep. When do you put Tassie?
Well, this was debated at board level for years and years. We actually made a promise to the then Premier in pit lane. There was, I think, Tony Cochrane and Shane Howard standing there promising the Premier that we'd either be there in April or by April, so March, April, or in November. And that was probably 2009 when we went there at the end of May, beginning of June, and it was freezing.
Yeah.
So probably the time is to go in between the Gold Coast and Adelaide, to be honest, towards the end of the year. Because if we're going to New Zealand in April, that's fairly time consuming, especially if you're doing a sea freight deal there. So that's one thing. I think the other thing, and one of the great attractions to me about supercars compared with DTM or British touring cars, for instance, is that we have a really good approach to having different events. Yeah, we've got different formats. We've got the Bathurst 1000, etc. at one extreme, and then we've got those 4 races at Melbourne at the Grand Prix, with this year with no refueling, no pit stops at all. So no tyres, no fuel. And how good was that? The racing was great. I'd do that at Phillip Island.
Okay.
Right? Because Phillip Island's got the most dangerous pit lane, well, probably in the world almost, let alone Australia. So why not use that as, okay, well, let's not go down pit lane. Let's use it as an excuse to have the same format as the Grand Prix and run that a couple of times a year. So, having some more differences, I don't think there's anything wrong with that approach at all.
The compulsory pit stop thing, let's just park at that, pardon the pun, obviously makes a massive difference. We had a great outcome as a result. Do we head to more of those? And why wouldn't we head to more of those if it's producing, again, more unpredictability, more variables?
I think you can. You mix up the events, but if you go back 20 years, all we did was 3 races and 2 sets of tyres. You had 8 tyres and you did practice.
3 half-hour races.
Three half-hour races, and there was some cracking races. So, yeah, it's definitely doable. Mix it up, give people some variety. I don't like the fuel drop. I don't like being told what to do in a race. For me, it's always start the race, see at the end, So you introduce the pit stops and your variables. And
well, there shouldn't be any compulsory pit stops, should there?
I don't
at all. You're saying at all?
No,
you should. So Taupo at the weekend.
Yeah, if it's wet and you worked out, hey, I can get home on one set of wets, you might have done that. Someone might have come in for some more. So.
Yeah, but why do you need compulsory pit stops? Have it so that the fuel tank, for instance, was designed in Gen 3 to be 130 plus litres. I think it ended up at 133 litres. But that was meant to be the maximum. It's not the minimum, right? The minimum, we used to race in the blueprint days. We had a fuel tank that was, I think, 80 litres as opposed to the long distance one that was 120. So you can use balls to reduce the capacity of the tank. So I'd put the capacity of the tank down rather than having it 133 litres at Taupo. I would have put it down to, let's say, 100. Yeah, it might be a bit less, might be a bit more. But you put it down to that sort of level, because then people are going to have to take on, instead of 12 seconds of fuel, they're probably going to have to take on 30 seconds at some point in the race. It's up to them how they do it. Yeah. So then if they get to the end of the race without refueling, they're cheating.
Right.
Simple as that. So to me, green flag waves and the fewer rules you've got before the checkered flag, the better. Same at Bathurst. I mean, it's at Bathurst, if you can get to the end of the race without doing 5 stops or 6 stops or whatever it is, well then something's illegal.
Yeah, and if you wind back why the fuel drop and the compulsory pit stop all come in, because teams used to be able to do what they want, so then they'd start leaning engines off.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, so then you're damaging engines and pistons, and it's an engine race. But we don't have that problem anymore because you got control engines, control engine maps.
Yep.
So if the driver can save some fuel, that's good. But the engine tuner doesn't have the ability to damage an engine. So there's no reason not to do it now.
Just another variable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. What's your thoughts? Let us know in the comments about, should we be heading to racing that doesn't have compulsory pit stops, and it really is working it out on the day. So what I'm hearing you guys say, if we consider late February start, November finish, and essentially we don't operate over summer in supercars, we go sprint car racing instead, right? So that, I guess that works out to every 3 to 4 weeks we've got around. Is that We used the term sweet spot before, every 3 to 4 weeks that we've got a round running.
Every 3 weeks or so, yes. I mean, but there are going to be times when you've almost got to back-to-back them, right?
Right.
And now that the teams hate that, and I've been a part of hating it in the past, believe me. But somewhere you got to drive it and say, okay, we've got different cars now. We shouldn't have to service them as much. You should be able to do it. If you have to leave them in the truck, get them out of the next race meeting. If that's the way you have to do it, to shape a calendar to optimally for everyone involved, for the TV, for stakeholders, for fans, everyone. So to me, the start date next year is clear. It should be the first weekend of March, because the second weekend of March you got the Adelaide Festival, and the third weekend you got the Grand Prix.
Yeah.
So you start it at the beginning of March. That should be before the football's kicked off. So you got a sort of pretty open space there. Then you go into the Grand Prix. Then you're going to go to New Zealand. You're going to come out of New Zealand and start your sort of lap of Australia and just see where everything fits in after that, before you get to hopefully still Sandown or the Bend, whichever it is, and then Bathurst, Gold Coast, Tasmania, and Adelaide.
Can we revisit that thing that talked about New Zealand? Long way to go for one race. Do we have 2 races in New Zealand? Are you opposed to that idea? Do you think it logistically makes sense?
Logistically it does, but you need to sort out the tracks here first, I think.
Right.
There's some tracks here that we should be racing at before we double up over there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the other thing is, we've got race drivers getting paid up to $1 million a year that only work 12 weekends a year. And that's why they're pissing off to do NASCAR and do all these other things.
GTs.
And driving GTs. And so
They've got the time.
unless they're Will Brown who's selling cars during the week.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're all got nothing to do. So
Yeah, interesting.
got to keep them racing.
Got to keep them busy.
And Supercars have given the Speed Series, and GTs in particular, but a free kick this year.
Trans Am.
By going to circuit, and Trans Am.
Trans Am, you got Jimmy Golding, Slady, which
Hazelwood.
You got 3 guys in there. I reckon you'll see another one at the next round.
But they've given them a free kick by going to circuits, and the spectators as well. Going to QR, going to Phillip Island, etc. Which they've Supercars created a vacuum, and they've popped in there.
Yeah, because of the availability of time.
Yeah, but I think it's a good thing because you've got some young guys there and people in GT and Trans Am that can benchmark themselves against some established talent. Team owners should be looking at that. There's some old guys there that probably need to move on and have a look around and take a punt on some of these kids.
That sounds to me like another grind my gears subject of, is there drivers there? Let's not talk about it now. We'll take a break, but I think we come back and we have a quick chat about that whole thing of, you've just raised the point, we've got these, potentially $1 million drivers out there that aren't getting used a whole lot. Are they overpaid? Do they need to be doing more? And is there some there that shouldn't be there anymore? Are you prepared to go there?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, let's do it. We're going to take a short break. Put your comments in the comments section. What's your thoughts on what these guys are talking about? We'll be back shortly. A little bit of a preview of what we've got coming up in Perth, and sounds like these guys are ready to have a chat about who shouldn't be on the grid anymore. We'll be back after this.
At Truck Assist, we only cover one thing. Specifically, trucks for landscaping, trucks for cabinet making, bed trucks. Smell that bread truck. Trucks for chippies, ones for brickies. Oh, and really big vans. We get your business sorted. With roadside assist if your battery says nope. Downtime cover if this is your only hope. And motor cover if things don't go to plan.
G'day, mate.
That's insurance from the specialists. Truck Assist, it's what we do.
We're in the third sector of episode 2 here of the Polarizer podcast, powered by Speed Cafe. Benny Bish with you, with RD and the Dude. You've put a couple of opinions out there, and we just stepped over the cliff there of something that I don't know where this is going to go. But you raised this idea of, okay, we need these more events on the calendars. One of the reasons why, you've got race car drivers who ain't doing a whole lot with their life for a decent-sized paycheck. Who are they? And who are the ones who need to move on? What's the philosophy in setting up a team? You need a young guy and an established guy, surely.
Yeah, and I'm always been pretty strong on it because, as soon as I realised I was too slow, I just put a young guy in the seat. For me, that was Timmy Slade, and I had a year with him, and then I couldn't keep him for the second year, and the sponsor was Castrol at the time, and they wanted an established driver, which was Murph, and no disrespect to Murph or anything, but he was at the back end of his career, and I was passionate about keeping a young guy in the car, and Roland even came down with me to a meeting in Sydney and explained the virtues of doing it, but I just couldn't get it across the line. I lost him to Stone Brothers, and he went on and did great things. So, you get that commercial pressure to keep the established star in the car, and they're good with the sponsors, whatever. But ideally, you need a situation where you got an established guy and a young guy. So, and RD had that with Lounsey and Whincup. You see Matt Payne at Grove. So you got to invest in it. And you're seeing it with Woody now. Woody's a flamboyant driver. He just adds spice to the championship. So yeah, there's probably a few guys there that should be worried.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they're just not delivering?
They're not delivering. So
no, maybe not delivering consistently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think that's. But I think I understand the pressures on a team owner. You've just described them really well around the Castrol deal.
Yeah.
Because over the years, the sponsor maybe wants a surety of a known person, somebody de-risk it a bit, etc. But the team's looking further down the line, saying, "Hang on, we've got to be thinking about what this looks like in 2, 3, 4 years' time." And certainly with Brock Feeney, when I first went to Red Bull Australia with the proposition of developing him with Super 2 with Red Bull, they turned me down. And then I convinced them otherwise. So you've got to work pretty hard at it to create the potential situation for them to develop. I mean, I believed in Brock, and a lot of what I believed in Brock was because Paul believed in Brock, and we'd seen him together operating in different cars, but also his demeanour, his work ethic. It's a whole series of different things. You say, okay, well, I'd like to give this guy a go, but it's not a sure thing ever. So you're taking a risk. But I saw it as honestly the way to go, whether it was with Brock or somebody else. I mean, I actually offered Will Brown a deal in 2018 as a development driver for 888, thinking that he'd develop and be in a position to take Jamie's place when Jamie retired, whenever that was going to be back in those days. So I completely agree with Paul that really sponsors and team owners, you can't just blame the team owners. You got to also put the onus on the sponsors as well to realise that it is worth backing a Matt Payne or a Ryan Wood, and I think that's great by both Walkinshaw and Groves to have gone down that route with those two young guys, but there are other guys as well who also deserve to be there.
Yeah, interesting. A couple of you want to drop a couple of names because you got to excuse me. I'm still stuck back at people turning you down. I'm still what? It's Red Bull turned you down on one of your suggestions, and Will Brown didn't.
Well, they
take
didn't ultimately,
right?
And
sure.
But
he can sell.
He can.
They didn't ultimately. They came to the party, but I had to sell it, as Paul says. And Will Brown did. Yes, he turned me down. But it all came good in the end. So happy days. But I think hopefully you see this year with that 888 wildcard program with Cooper Murray. I think he's somebody who would justify being given a leg up and a go full time in Supercars.
Yeah, okay. Any others you want to throw in the?
There's probably 4 guys sitting there in Super 2 right now, but let's not call them out and put pressure on them.
Yeah, that's the thing,
But
isn't
you
it?
got Kai Allen sitting there ready to go. Like if I was,
I think he's a standout.
yeah, if I was Will Davison and Anton, I'd be shitting myself because
Really? Wow.
he's really good. He ticks all the boxes. So, and like I've probably got to give Barry from Erebus a bit of a shout out too, because love him or hate him, he's always giving young blokes a go.
He's blooded a few.
Yeah, well, he put Brock in a co-driver session at Winton in the wet in the main game car when he was 16. Like, and that's when you saw Brock first pop up to like.
Yeah, right.
So then Brody, Anton, Will, he's done his bit.
So
Yeah.
if you consider this dynamic of, I guess, there's sponsorship money and it costs a lot to run these teams and all of those different things, that guy brings that much money, so we've got to consider him because he's got an established profile, all of those different things.
Yeah.
What I probably struggle to understand is surely you only turn up if you think you can win. Is there guys there that are just, they know that they haven't got a chance, they are past their prime, and they are only there because there's a lifestyle that comes with the sponsorship back?
Yeah, well, one of the best, and he's a good mate of mine, and he knows he did it, was Russell Ingall.
Yeah.
Into his 50s.
Right.
And still getting a good earn and doing a good job. So, yeah, it can be done. Yeah.
At what cost, though, to the next generation coming through?
Oh, you can become known as a seat blocker.
Yeah.
Yeah, reality is. But, for my money, there are one or two people at the moment who can be very good on their day, but they're not consistent at being in the mix, and they probably it's time for those teams and sponsors to make way for next generation. Certainly, if I was running a team in that situation, I'd be looking further beyond the bonnet rather than just the windscreen.
The person who played it the best was Lounsey. He probably had a good advisor.
Oh.
But he got out at his top and state, and he still got an amazing brand as an amazing driver because when he gets in the car, he still wins. He plays to his strengths.
I mean, Lounsey won Bathurst in his final year as a full-time driver. So and when he was stepping down as a full-time driver, half of them didn't want to.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, looking back now, was the timing right? I believe it was totally right. And he's carried on he's got a co-driving position now that's, I'm not sure of his deal, but I think it runs a year after this year as well.
Right.
You know, how old will he be? Well, over 50. Over 50. So, yeah, he's had a pretty good run. And good luck to him, because he deserves it.
Yeah. It's interesting. It really fascinates me of trying to find that, I guess, that sweet spot again. There's that term of when to call it and when not to, because at the end of the day, you got a nice lifestyle. You don't want to give it away.
Yeah, where else are you going to get paid $600,000-700,000 a year to work 12 weekends a year?
Not bad, is it? not bad, is it, when I think about it? Oh, wow. Okay, so let's, in light of all that, you've made some really, really good points. Again, love to know your thoughts on what these guys are saying in regards to people on the grid that maybe it's coming to an end. Do you know of any contracts that are up? I
think there's one or two that are up that are year by year at the moment, and or longer ones that are up this year. As Paul says, you know, you look at somebody like Kai Allen, you want to be looking over your shoulder, to be honest. But I think that you can't also get away from the fact that the other person who got the timing exactly right and was brave and took a pay cut because of it was Jamie Whincup. You know, he took a big pay cut and then backed himself to do something he hadn't done before. In terms of running a team with what's the thick end of 70 people today, and backed himself over that for less money than he was earning, appreciably less money, and but his record is intact, if you like. His credibility in the sport as a driver is intact.
He didn't do a Jimmy Johnson.
No, Jimmy's gone on too long, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So, and continues to.
Yeah, it even looks
flogging
worse.
a dead horse.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, trying to get it right. Okay, we need to bring that. Let's close it up and look ahead to this weekend. We're back in Perth, back at Barbagallo, back at Wanneroo, whatever name you want to use, depending on how long you've been around for. They've made some amazing improvements to the facilities over there over the years. There's been a cost, though, to the spectator, Paul.
Yeah, I think so. That when you think of that inside pit building complex, you used to have that beautiful amphitheatre. The crowd on the front straight and all the people on the back hill there could see that whole section. And the crowd's dwindled, and when you speak to them, it's because of that. So
Really? Yeah. See, because we don't want to, keep raving on about Taupo.
yeah,
Topor. But that's one of the things that keeps coming back to me. I remember, as a probably a 14-year-old, I found this little spot at Lakeside.
oh yeah,
And it was, I can't remember exactly where it was, but I stood there and it was just the corner of this fence and I pretty much could see the whole thing. I mean, that's a big deal. And that's what a lot of people are saying out of New Zealand, yeah?
yeah, it is a big deal.
Yeah,
So-
we've discussed that around QR, haven't we? That you can see the whole thing and etc. Perth, look, I'm not quite as sold on that theory as Paul is. Paul's talked about it for a long time. I like that complex in the middle there. But
It's good for the teams.
Yes, from a team operation point of view, it's very good. One of the things about whether the pit lane there, whether it was on the outside or the inside, it's very short.
Yeah.
And that gives the capacity for a strategic approach to racing there on what's a high deg circuit. You saw Lansley a few years ago win a race with 3 stops when everyone else was 2 stopping. And that's because the pit lane's short. So that's a big positive to me about that, about the place. And that was still true on the outside of the circuit as well, you know, the short pit lane. But the circuit degrades fast because of the sand, etc. You know, every time they tarmac it, it's suddenly very fast and then slows down gradually. But it does make some pretty good racing. I think that there's a broader issue over there in trying to ensure that people know that we're coming to town and they're involved. And for whatever reason, we've dropped off the radar too much there. I can remember going there the first time in 2004 for me. And having to wait to get in, let alone to get out of the place. It was packed to the rafters, and latterly the crowds have been nowhere near as good. So, and the corporate nowhere near as good, and yet there's plenty of money over there. It's the richest place in the country. So, what have we got to do about getting more people there? This weekend, you've got. Bush going back there, Brodie Kostecki, now back in the championship, which is hopefully be great, appreciated by the local crowd.
Home track.
Yeah, but also by him, feeling that he's at home and he's got the miles under his belt in New Zealand and now can have a good crack at a track which he did very well at last year.
Yeah, okay. So what's the solutions? You see any other solutions? I mean, obviously we're not going to pull down the pit lane.
I reckon he got it.
Really?
Yeah. If I was investing any money in that place, I'd bowl that pit lane over, dig back into the bank and...
Well, so still leave it on the infield,
Nah,
but like
just
it
get rid of
lower? Or?
Just get rid of it.
No,
Really?
Paul's saying put it on the outside, back
Again,
where the old pit lane.
Yeah.
But you
smash
used to
the
have to
bank.
drive up the hill and around the corner.
no, but
and,
The easiest
Bill-
thing they can do in Western Australia is move dirt.
Correct. They got more earth movers than anyone
They'd
else
have that
on
done by
earth.
lunchtime.
Yeah, he's right.
Dig back in there, sort it out.
Put some garages in.
It's been a mistake.
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Which it was, my memory was so long coming. Like they fought to get that development for years and years and years, and then finally happens. And now Paul Morris is saying it's a stupid idea.
Yeah, it is.
He
if
was
you look
part
at-
of the party who went to the Premier to ask for the permission to do it and the money to do it. You were on that.
Yeah, I was on that jump.
on that posse.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
So what were you saying back then? Were you saying, oh, this is great, now you realise that it's too late?
The reason why we pushed for it to be on the outside, and the reason they gave us was all the car club members that owned those corporate boxes didn't want to move them.
Oh.
But then when you spoke to the car club guys, they were like, "I don't know anything about it." So
Wow.
But if it was my decision, I'd just bowl the thing over and put it back on the outside.
But given that's probably not going to happen, what else can we do?
Thank you, Roland.
What else can you do?
Well, I mean, we got the event needs revitalising to me. It needs,
Yeah, well, you used to have people used to be able to, they used to park up the night before and camp in the bush.
I know.
Then someone parked over an open fire and their car burnt down or something, so they stopped all that, you know.
Right.
It was always a bit hard to get in and out of, wasn't it? But people
That's
are used
true.
to that.
Yeah.
So, but
I'd prefer to have that than
but
not
the
enough
road,
people.
there's a road going north now, so they've just got to promote the fact that it's easy to get in, easy to get out, and it's a good day out, and the bush is back, you know.
The whole bush is back thing, it was just really... I'll throw it out there. I don't think that there is a state as parochial as Western Australia.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of room there to promote the heck out of Brodie being back there. He's a very proud West Australian, and surely there's room.
Everyone's keen to see him back there except one person,
Who?
Pete Adderton.
Oh. I thought you meant Todd Hazelwood.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's an interesting angle. Yeah. One person. Do you want to embellish that?
No.
Just throw on that. Okay.
You just lobbed that.
Just love that.
Just walked away. He's looked at the timer and worked out that we've only got 3 minutes left on the seg. I'm just going to say that and go. That's fantastic. Okay, really, really cool opinions. All that aside, not bowling down the concrete in the new pit and all of that sort of stuff, it's still a cool racetrack.
It is. It's produced some great racing over the years with that pit complex or without. You know, I remember... which year was it? Probably 2012, I think, with there was a big war that year between FPR, as it was known then, and 888. I think Jamie taking on Will Davison and Frosty, Mark Winterbottom that year, where they basically all bowled over the line together. I think Frosty or Will won it.
Oh, yes.
But they were catching Jamie, who was on a different strategy or stopped earlier or whatever, and they all bowled up together. Duddo's on the radio to Jamie saying, "Just take them off, do whatever you have to do," etc. Which was, was the passion, But it was an example of how we've had have had some really good racing. I mean, Landsey, when he whipped everyone and beat Shane and Jamie a few years ago on the different strategy, on the 3-stopper. As opposed to the 2-stopper, I think it was 2016 or something. Shane and Jamie, where did he come from? Yeah, we thought we'd driven this race pretty well. So it's produced some pretty good racing, hasn't it, over the years?
Oh, from a driver's point of view, it's one of those tracks that as soon as you drive out of pit lane, it's got that flow.
Yeah.
It's a bit like going to Lakeside, You got to drive the car. Some of the corners you got to put the balls on the dash and breaking down into the bomb hole and letting the thing. So it's a cool track to drive, and you can strategize a bit with you can follow someone and just see them starting to eat up into their tyre. You can run two or three laps. I'm going to have you. It's that sort of stuff that makes it exciting. So. Yeah, drivers love it. If the crowd could see the whole track, I reckon the place will be full.
The key thing, though, is like, what I was talking about with QR. Like, it's got undulation, and that's instant character in a racetrack.
It is. Yeah, it's a different challenge to QR for sure, but it's an awesome track. It's up there with the Lakeside of Phillip Island.
But it's also cool on TV because you know how often you've got elevation as a racetrack and you can't see it on TV?
Yes.
There you can.
Yeah.
You can see it. The in-cars coming out of the bowl up the hill. Mm-hmm. And as Paul says, you can see when somebody's trying a bit too hard and the back's moving. And so you see the elevation there. And then you see them bowl down into the last corner. You do get the elevation feeling on TV. Whereas so many other tracks you go to or watch on TV and you don't really know how much elevation change there is. I mean, Sepang at the weekend in Malaysia, you walk around it, you can see how much elevation change there is. You watch it on TV, you'd think it was flat as a pancake.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, it does come up really, really nice.
So what do you reckon we need to hill at QR, mate? Like they did at Calder. With the,
They get the excavators in at one section, just dig it all out and put that land over there and put at one corner, banked corner, and maybe turn 1 or turn 2, put a banked corner so it's just no breaking into it. I don't know. You guys can come up with that.
Cool.
You've done well. Appreciate your time. It's been a terrible environment to be in, isn't it?
Oh, it's terrible, isn't it? It's really nice.
Your choice of cars here. Any thoughts of anything that you'd like to take for a drive? They all need to be started and run now. Surely we could do Tony a favour and take something for a run.
It's got some cool stuff here.
There's an old SL Mercedes at the back, 107.
Mm-hmm.
They're bulletproof things. I love those old Mercs. Mm-hmm. And back in the day when they made them as strong as brick shithouses, they're really proper thing. Sitting at the back of all that American crap, you got a proper thing at the back, which I really like that one.
What would you take, Paul? The beach buggy. Brilliant. Unbelievable. I'm stuck over at the 32 coupe over there because it's American Graffiti and that
John
movie.
Milner.
Yeah. So who was it? Ron Howard, Richard Dreyfuss, Han Solo. Yeah, that's right. It birthed all of their careers, and so I'm stuck back at that. What was his name? Johnny Milner.
John Milner.
That's right. 100%. Yeah, with his going out and babysitting that night. But anyway, I'd take that. You're in the beach buggy.
Give us your best Wolfman Jack.
Yeah. Oh man, I listen to that soundtrack so over and over and over. Like because he does the freak. Phone up the pizza shop. It's all of that sort of stuff. But that was cool. American Graffiti. Anyway, we digress. It's time for us to wrap up. Thanks, guys, for your time. Appreciate it. A massive thank you to Garage 25 for having us here. Where we will be for episode 3 officially, no idea. But keep your eyes on Speed Cafe and we'll let you know. Enjoy your time over in Perth. And we'll sure to have a wrap from what happened in the West next time we join you here on the Polarizer podcast. Thanks to Speed Cafe.